Let's get started. Welcome to the last talk of the day, 10 tips to become an awesome technical lead. I will start by giving you some great news up front. After my talk, there can be a lot of drinking, so that's always a very good one. Also, I read that this room is actually called the hands-on lab room, so if you're expecting this to be a hands-on lab, it's not going to be that. But again, I will try my best to involve you as much as possible, ask you some questions and things like that. My name is Bart Blommaerts. I'm a hands-on application architect, and I work at Ordina in Belgium. I work in a business unit called JWorks, and we mainly do Java and JavaScript. If you have any questions for me or remarks or just random shouts, you can always reach me via my Twitter handle. Now, I promised that I would try to involve you guys as much as possible, so I'll start by asking a question. Who here in the room is a software developer? Oh, I totally did not expect that, I'm sorry. Okay, next question. Who has been developing software for over 10 years? So you really think I'm a senior developer, I've done large projects, I've done smaller projects. So senior developers? Okay, that's less, okay, it's no problem. And then the final question, who is currently or has worked as a technical lead? So you had a couple of people working in your team, looking at you for guidance. All right, can you keep your hands on? Like 20 to 30%? Who has worked with other technical leads in the past of those people? And of everybody else? So there's like 20% who is currently working as a technical lead, and about 10% who has ever worked with a technical leads. That's interesting. I'll come back to that. Now, it's really interesting. If I want to talk about technical leadership, then I should probably start with some kind of definition about technical leadership. And I believe technical leadership is mainly a combination of technical skills and leadership skills. So if you work as a technical lead, you should be looking at setting the technical direction for your team. And also act as the go-to person for example, when business wants to contact you and things like that. But let's dive into that a bit more. Technical leadership is about technical guidance. What tools are we going to use? How will we be delivering our product or the project that we're doing? And things like that. So the picture actually is the Nürburgring in Germany. And it has also some guidance about the maximum speeds. So when Josh Long says that Disneyland and production are really the best places on Earth, he's relying on Nürburgring is the best place on Earth. Another part is about risk and requirements. If you have been here at the conference, you have probably seen a lot of really interesting talks. And there's one particularly interesting concept around that. You see a lot of interesting talks, you go back to your project you're working on, and you say, oh, I really want to do Spring Boot too. I saw Stefan doing a great talk on that. As a technical lead, you should be looking at, okay, what are the risks if you want to implement new technology within our current project, and of course mitigate those risks. It's also about coaching. Most teams will generally have more experienced and less experienced people together, because from a cost point of view, that just makes a lot of sense. So it's up to the senior people to be coaching the less senior people. And it's also about communication. It's about making sure that the right people are talking to each other. It's making sure that you're talking with your business, that you're actually implementing something that they care about instead of something else. Now, one question that you could ask yourself is, do we really need a technical lead? If you start Googling for this topic on the internet, there's actually a lot of debate on this. Do we really need a technical lead? Maybe the role is not really necessary. Maybe we can say everything is awesome. We have the amazing team. Everybody really is working together. We're discussing. We find a consensus. So maybe we don't need a technical lead. And in an ideal world, well, everything is awesome. If you have seen the Lego movie, unfortunately, not everything is awesome all the time. It is even if you have this perfect condition where people really respect each other and you can make decisions, it is very easy to create something, to create discussions that will have a bad effect on that really delicate balance. And furthermore, your business, there will also be looking for a single point of contact that they can work with. So that also means that if you have a larger development team, you probably will be the guy that they will, or the girl that they will be talking to, because, well, in general, developers don't really like to be interrupted all the time. So unfortunately, not always, not everything is awesome. If you have a really well-functioning team where people share responsibilities, it is still a very delicate balance. And we should really be focusing on some of the activities that I will be talking about later of the technical lead are fulfilled instead of having just one person who is the technical lead. It's just an activity. It's not a formal role or anything, or I don't think it should be one. Now, as the title it says, there are always two sides to a story. There is the technical responsibilities and there's the leadership responsibilities. And I will give tips for both of these. In my experience, the balance is never 50% for each. I've never seen that before. So let's dive into the technical tips. The first tip that I would like to start with is advocate for change. I believe that if you work within a project, that you will very easily find out things that can be changed, things that cause pain. And as a technical lead, you should be on the lookout for those. How can we improve these things? And then install a mindset of positive evolution. How I like to think about it is with a process called the OODA. It means observe, orient, decide, act, and it's a re-entrant loop. So when we look at the observation phase of a project, we will be looking at things that might go better. For example, you have a build that sometimes doesn't work, and then you just hit Jenkins again, and maybe it works the next time. Or a unit test that sometimes fails. I mean, everybody has probably seen these kind of tests. And then in the orientation phase, you will use your experience, what you know about the project, what you saw from other projects in the past, saying, okay, this unit test, how can we solve it? Because it fails sometimes. If you run it again, it may work. So it might be some kind of race conditions, or maybe it's a crazy operating system. Maybe people are running Windows, or then nobody's running Windows. Anyway, you use your experience to come up with a couple of alternatives. And then obviously you need to make a decision. Okay, we're going to fix this because this is an actual problem. And we're also going to identify somebody who will be responsible for fixing this. This might be you, this might be someone from the team. And then obviously we need to act on that as well. It's just not good to take a decision and then to forget about it, because then basically nothing is happening. And what's really interesting about OODA is that it's a re-entrant loop. So you can make new orientation, new observations based on prior decisions. For example, if you fix that failing unit test, maybe a lot more other unit tests are failing. So that's, again, a situation that you need to be look out. It is about experiencing the same pain as everybody else in the team. The technical lead is not somebody who comes to the project, to the product, maybe once or twice a week and then starts looking at everybody. Are you still happy? Are you still doing a great job? That doesn't work. You should be in the team and have some, like what the Japanese call this, a Kaizen state of mind, always looking for improvement. What can we change? How can we go better, faster? That's the Daft Punk song, right? No, that's not what I intended to say. And I really believe in this continuously trying to improve yourself. And I've done this talk at previous conference a couple of times, and often after the talk people come up to me and say, I have this problem, or have you thought about this? And I actually use their feedback as well to change my talk. So this talk is now called 12 Tips to Become an Awesome Technical Lead. Welcome! We'll continue immediately with tip number 2. Work through failure and success. Things will fail. And you need to prepare for that. If you know that things will fail, it is easier to cope with the failure. You should not be finger pointing at someone and saying, oh, you caused this to fail. No, it's wasted energy. Use your energy that you have to try fixing that problem. And don't fix the same problem twice. Look at that integration test, at unit test, to make sure that you're not always fixing the same thing, and take responsibility. That maybe assign somebody to specific problems. And of course, learn from this failure. So if you have failure, we also should be celebrating success. And I believe you should celebrate your success early and often, and basically as much as budget allows. Yeah, I should. But you should also celebrate small things. I have a personal example of something that I've experienced last year. We were working on a project for a customer, and the last phase of the project, like with any project, it was cumbersome. People needed to work really hard, but we got it done. We went to the project, to the people who ordered the project, and we give a demo, and they, oh, wow, you did a really great job. We like it a lot, but we have a new management, and management has a different vision. They have a different strategy. We're not going to put your project into production. If you have been waiting for that specific moment to celebrate, that's probably not a very nice message to deliver to a team. So do sprint celebrations. If you do 2-week sprints and the sprint is successful, go out, have a drink, go have lunch, do smaller things, just enjoy it. It's fun. The team will work better together, and the people in the team will be happy. For example, when a feature is complete, you can also do the celebrations. And what's very important is that you congratulate both the team and the individual people who work in the team. So for example, when somebody comes up to you and he has a great idea, oh, I saw this at JavaDay, we should really be looking at whatever technology that you saw. And if that idea, if it turns to be valuable, if it's really good, if it's helping the project, then you should celebrate the individual as well, because it will allow out-of-the-box thinking. It will inspire creativity. Number 3, stay technical. This might be actually more difficult than it sounds like. If you have a larger team, then you will get interrupted a lot of the time, but I really believe that you should stay technical. You're a technical lead, you're not management or something. So you should be involved in the code base. You should write code, you should review code, make sure that there's like a technical vision, and also explain to your team members how you got to that technical vision. Because they will need to adopt it, they will need to believe in it. And the best way to make sure that they believe in your technical vision is by making sure that they can cooperate in creating the technical vision. It will allow for a very easy adoption of it. And also be very aware of the evolution of the code. Every project starts out as a really nice project. Oh, we're going to do behavior-driven development. We're going to do tests first. It's going to be a great project. And then after 6 months, it's like, oh no, we've done it again. So make sure that you just keep a watch out for the project, for the code base. Especially when you get less involved in the actual code base. I have a couple of examples about that later as well. When we go to conferences, and I know all of you like doing that, we generally like the new framework, the new libraries. Oh, Spring Boot is, version 2 is coming out. Oh, there's something really cool called Vertex. We want to do all those kind of things. But in general, developers are like less interested in networking and security. That's not really that sexy, is it? Deployment, I mean, that's just cumbersome. That takes time. That's not writing any actual code. And consistency over the code base. And that's really strange, because if you look back at JavaDay, there have been so many talks about microservices, about serverless, about distributed applications, where all of these are like super important. As a technical lead, you should make sure that these topics, these non-functional requirements, are addressed correctly, and that they stay addressed in the future. It's very, very important. Always available. You're laughing. Why are you laughing?
It's hard to combine number 3 with number 4.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree with you. In general, when you have a technical leadership role, you have the technical parts, as one of your colleagues was just saying, and you have the leadership parts. And you should try to come up with some time management to make sure what are you going to do? How much time will you be spending on, for example, the technical design? And the technical design is like making sure that everybody in the project knows what to do in a certain fashion. It's also about communicating with business, because you might have a really nice technical design, you might have the technical vision, but it needs to match with the requirements from business, from the people who are paying for the project. Project management, which is the most fun part of technical design, of technical leadership. It's about making sure that there are user stories available, that people have any actual work. This is especially true when you work with for example, offshore developers, because they don't have the possibility to talk directly to the customer. Your user stories, what you created, your acceptance criteria, it will often be their main point of information in order to be able to finish the user story. And then time that you'd be spent on writing the actual code. Now the numbers in here, they're less important than just the fact that there are a couple of responsibilities that you should be looking at. But what I try to do is, up front, I will have some kind of numbers, basically these, and then during the project I will see how the project evolves and see, okay, how much time am I actually spending on talking with business? It might be less, it might be more, but it's very important that you're aware of these. It might be that you're not doing any coding whatsoever, as I explained in tip number 3. That's an issue. You should be looking at that. It might mean, for example, that you need to hire somebody to do the Scrum Master or the project management. So those insights are very, very valuable. But again, as you said, be realistic. When people come to you and start asking questions, when there are less experienced people, then you might be able to answer ad hoc. Oh, yeah, you just need to write this annotation or do this or do that. when more experienced people are coming up to you and they have a question, that might take some time. You might need to request some time saying, okay, I will look into it. I have no clue what the answer is to that specific problem, but I will take some time and investigate it. When you do that, it's also very important that you come back to the person who asked the initial question, but just a sign of respect that when people ask you something that you deliver on it. Also, as a technical lead, it's interesting if you try to connect people. Maybe the person who asked the question doesn't have any experience with databases, but maybe you have somebody else in the team who is very experienced with that. Maybe you should bring the two together and see how they can resolve the problem themselves, and then maybe document it for future reference. Be a mentor for your team. And I've categorized these in a couple of underlying parts. The first one is about mediating. We were talking about discussions earlier in the team. As a mediator, it's important that you facilitate this discussion because a lot of valuable input can come from it. You should try to look for consensus and make sure that everybody in the team agrees on a certain solution. So that's a very important role. But a side remark, if it's really impossible to take a decision as a consensus from the team, then you as a technical leader, you're accountable. So take a decision. It's worse not taking the decision because the discussions will just spark up in the future and they will become increasingly worse. Mentoring. In general, when somebody takes on the role as a technical lead, it means that they have at least proven a new version of Java is available. Do you guys have like 15 minutes? No, okay. I'll skip this version. Okay. It was actually a Java 8 update, so who cares? Mentoring the team. I completely forgot what I was going to say. Okay, yeah, I remember now. Mentoring the team is also very important because you will have less experienced people, you have junior developers in your team, and they maybe need more coaching, need more guidance. That does not mean that you need to do all of the mentoring. It can also be interesting just bringing people together as a technical lead. I really lost what I was going to say. I remember now. Mentoring is also something that's increasingly important at the beginning of a new project because a lot of people from different areas will come together, from different experience levels will come together. And as a technical lead, you want to make sure, okay, we have this technical vision. We really care, for example, about the code quality that we're writing. And I tend to do this in the same manner all the time. So in the beginning, when people submit pull requests, I will personally review all the pull requests. And I will be very strict. I will write unit tests that cause null pointers. It makes you very popular, trust me. But if you explain the rationale behind this, if you say, okay, this is why I'm doing this, they will adopt it. And people will increasingly get better at this, and you will have less code reviewing to do, and you can share that responsibility as well. Effective delegation. I already mentioned it a couple of times. Effective delegation. As a technical lead, you don't need to do everything because it will not work. Trust me on that. You need to make sure that some people can take the responsibility and you give them ownership. You say, okay, I think this is something that you can work on and be available for those people as well. Matching goals. I think this is also a very important one. There will be different people in your team. And they will have different ambitions. This is like specifically targeted dynamic coaching. What does it really mean? Specifically targeted, it's about what you want to do. What's your goal? And it's also dynamic because it will change. You might come across new people that you learn and want to do new things. Communication skills are very important in that as well. What you can also do, for example, if you have somebody who wants to become a technical lead, you can think about like role rotation. Okay, maybe you do it for this week and I will be there for coaching you and things like that. Of course, you can also share my slide deck. And then optimize for the group. The individual people in a team are very important, but when you need to make a decision, it will be a decision for the group, for the team. So that's also very important that you try to make sure that you optimize for the team, for their goal, and not for individuals. So know when to give input, know when to make decisions, because not taking a decision is worse than taking the wrong decision, and I mean that. But also know when to step back. Number 6, surround yourself with other technical leads. So you can look at this at two levels. There's the personal level and there's an organizational level. When we talk about sharing yourself, how do I put it? Surrounding yourself with other technical leads. From a personal level, you can look at how they do, for example, a technical design. How do they set a technical vision without coming across as very dominant, because people like a certain amount of freedom. People like to work together. How do they do their time management? Learn from this. You should not blindly adopt it. Every project is different, every team is different, but it's very interesting if you look at the information that you get from your colleagues. And then at an organizational level, if you work for a certain customer and the customer has different teams, you should also be looking at, is there like a higher objective? What does the customer want to achieve? And how do they want to achieve this? For example, is there a global architecture that we need to be working with? And then, of course, if we talk about architecture, we're also talking about the interoperability of different systems. It can be that you create really the perfect system on for example, a Tomcat server running on some kind of Linux box. But if you're working for a company that uses Microsoft servers for everything else, there might be issues. I'm not going to say that there will be issues, but there might be interoperability issues. And then, of course, dependencies. And you can have dependencies on people, and you can have dependencies on systems. So a dependency on people, for example, means if you need a certain guy with a specific knowledge about whatever topic, maybe he is very strong at doing two-way SSL, you have a dependency on one specific person. You need to make sure that within the organization, you can make sure that you free up time for this person. And dependencies, of course, on systems. Maybe you will need to interact with a system that's not in production yet, or with services that are not yet available, or vice versa. I had this happen to me a couple of months ago, where there was a project that wanted to go to production, and they had a dependency on us. We didn't even think about production back then. We were absolutely not ready. So those are issues. Those are things that you need to think about up front. Now, this might sound a little bit corny, but you are not alone. There will be other technical leads in your environment. Maybe they don't work for the same customer, maybe they even don't work for the same project, but just communicating skills and networking is very important as a technical lead. And then you will benefit from this as well, because you have a larger network, then you can ask more people for assistance and things like that. And this actually is a new one. I included a couple of days ago. Think big, bias fraction is actually, these are 2 of the 12 leadership principles for Amazon. They have their 12 leadership principles just readily available on their website. It's very interesting to have a look at it. And think big, bias fraction means, on one hand, you want to create bold direction. You want to go to places where nobody has gone before. Because people will be motivated by this. They're working on something, yeah, this is big, this is worthwhile, we're going to invest our time in it, we are going to do our utmost best, and this will also inspire results, because they're working on something really interesting, really important. And it's also about thinking differently. It is very easy to look at all the constraints within a project. There will always be budget constraints, and the customer is always going to ask crazy questions and things like that. But you should try to not think about the constraints, but about the opportunities. And when you think about the opportunities, it's also about thinking at things that are not limiting for the future. A story that I recently read in a book called Liminal Thinking is about when you get a dog, it's possible that the dog comes from, you don't know its history. And maybe the dog in the past had issues. Maybe it was a dog who lived on the streets. And when you walk your dog around the streets, every time that it sees another dog, he becomes very aggressive. Maybe he needed to protect his food in the past, who knows. So when that's the situation, when those are the observations that you make, there are a couple of possible orientations, possible alternatives that you can consider. For example, you can say, okay, I'm not going to walk the dog anymore. But that's limiting. You're limiting yourself and you're limiting your dog. Another alternative that you can look, okay, we're still going to walk the dog, but I will be very cautious. I will also be on the lookout. Oh, there's another dog over there. I just go somewhere else. Again, that's limiting yourself. What also might be an alternative is, okay, I'm going to walk the dog, but I'm going to try to change its behavior. I will put candy in my pocket, and I'm going to put a lot of candy in my pocket. And every time that for a dog, I mean, every time that you come across another dog, you reward your dog. You give him some piece of candy, and you give a piece of candy to the other dog that it usually fights with. And in time, your dog will probably think, okay, every time that we go on a walk and I meet another dog, I get a reward. So it's pleasant to meet other dogs. You might change his behavior, and that's not a limiting decision. You can still work your dog, or you can not do it. You have opportunity. You have possibilities. Bias for action. You don't need to overthink every problem. A lot of the decisions that we make are reversible. And this is also like a delicate balance between thinking big and biasing for action. But you don't always need an extensive study to do something. If we look at the whole microservices movement, we can just invest in a certain technology, making sure that the bounded context, that the use case is handled correctly. And if it really turned out that that was not the best decision, it's not an entire monolith that you're going to refactor. It's just one small part of it. Because speed matters. The time to market is just becoming increasingly short. And if you start looking for smaller successes, if you put the flywheel in motion, it will keep on rotating. So maybe look at like low-hanging fruit and think, okay, maybe we can do this first, and then see, oh, this works, and people in the team will be motivated, they will be excited. So really, bias for action. Okay, leadership. Tip number 8 is about interviewing potential new team members. Unfortunately, people will leave your project, and new people will need to get hired. That's part of being in a team. And I have a movie about this. I hope that the sound will work. It's about full-stack developers.
So, you want your job?
What do you do?
Me and they have me hunter. Me all together.
You hunt together.
Need that many men. So, they will say I have it. Say that more time. Hunter? Maybe get it?
Why you leave that track?
That's more time. Me make the time to bigger.
How long you with that track?
10 months?
10 months? Me hear you leave after 2 months. Me hear you leave and go travel around playing with friends. Me too. Me don't try to chase for time.
Me just want to play. Me got just see to me. Yeah.
Lovely. Little. Little.
Going to that day, people.
If you have ever done multiple interviews on one day, some parts of these are actually similar. But I think it's very important that you prepare for an interview. You know your goal. I don't know if you know the yellow clown. It's called Boomba. It's very famous in Belgium. It's for kids. I have 2 boys, and they really like Boomba. Boomba is the national hero of my sons. And here you have Cirque du Soleil, and both are working in a circus, and both are very valuable. I mean, both have their merits, but I'm pretty sure that the people who are in those teams are not interchangeable. So know why you are interviewing. Are you looking for somebody for the longer term, or are you just looking for somebody to like increase the bandwidth? Say, okay, we have a very strict deadline, we need just more people. Because if you look at the usefulness of resumes, if you just need more people for a shorter term, then the resume, then the tooling is very important. But if you're looking for somebody for the longer term, I believe the tooling is less important. It's more about having the developer mindset, thinking about alternatives, being just generally interested in our profession. I mean, we have one of the coolest jobs out there. But it might be that it's different depending on what you're looking for. As I said, if you really want just to increase the bandwidth and get to the solution faster, then the tooling is very important. Also very important if we look back at the Mythical Man book, the book by Fred Brooks. 2 women will not be able to deliver a child in less than 9 months. So be realistic there as well. And again, eagerness to learn, I think it's very, very important. This might be the most important slide of my slide deck. Do not use Stack Overflow to question to find questions. And actually, maybe you should try to do that. Look at the questions that they're posing over there. If you need to look up the answer for one of those questions, then you should not be looking. Then you should not be asking it to potential new team members. If you're doing all kinds of machine learning or complex sorting algorithms, okay, then go ahead, ask those kind of questions. If you're not doing that, then why should people be knowing those kind of things? No questions about exactly what you're trying to achieve. What does your project want to do? Now, it's very easy for me to say, okay, you should not do this, you should not do that. It's more difficult to say what you should do. So I've added my personal 5 bullets on how to do that. In the beginning, most people who come to an interview can be quite nervous. That is normal, we all are that. So I think it's about comforting people who come to an interview is very important, especially in the beginning. And I always do this by asking the exact same question. And once a guy who saw my talk on YouTube asked me the question, so that was really surprising. But I generally try to ask a very simple question, because the way somebody thinks can be retrieved from that question. And the question that I always ask is, explain to me what is the difference between an interface and an abstract class in Java? You might all think, oh, that's a really stupid question. But you would be really surprised if you ask that question for a couple of years, what the responses are of the people. I'm not kidding. And you can always go to more difficult questions. For example, what has changed in Java 8? Generally, everybody knows what has changed in Java 8. I did a lot of interviews a couple of weeks ago, and if you ask them, okay, what has changed in Java 9? Then there are a lot less people who know the answer to that question. So offer options. Some people like to give a theoretical example, theoretical explanation. Other people like to give an example. Some people like drawing on a whiteboard. Maybe you want to present a laptop with an ID. All things are valid, but you need to prepare for that and have those things available. And then, as I just said, build on those responses. Look at the experience of the person that you're interviewing and look at what's necessary for the project. And try to combine those two. Okay, yeah, I see that you worked with struts, and we think struts is an amazing framework, but we're not using struts. Yeah, we're doing AngularJS because we think it's rockets. So look at what your project needs, look at what the experiences of the people are, and try to mingle them. And show a genuine interest in what the people are doing, because they will open up, they will give you so much more, and you can learn from that. You can see, okay, he or she is very interested in this kind of thing, and we need it in our project. That's very valuable information. And I generally try to end with a bonus question. And I always actually explicitly call this a bonus question. Look, we had this very big problem regarding, for example, asynchronous messages or queuing. We need to look at it it cost us a couple of days to find a solution for that. But what would you do? What would your approach be? Because if they get that question right, then you know, oh, this might be a really good match for us. And then finally, if it's not a match for you, just always be polite. It's perfectly possible that the person that you're interviewing is not a match for your project, but nobody wants to go home with bad feelings. So always be very polite. Embrace cultural differences. We are all different. We go home to lead different lives. Some of us are married, some of us have kids, others are not or don't have kids. And that's very valuable because your customer, your users, they'll also be different. And if you look at this small green thingy over here, that's Belgium. That's where I live. It's the greatest country in the world. And this is Ukraine. Ukraine is actually quite big. I did not know that Ukraine was so big. But compared to the entire world, look how small we are. I mean, is it really important where we're coming from? If we can work on something together? Opinions matter. If we have these different backgrounds, we might have different opinions on certain things. And that's actually a good thing. If somebody goes into a discussion with you saying, I don't think that we should do it like that, I have this experience, I've done that, that's something that you should really be embracing. Because it means that he or she is passionate enough about the project to go into the discussion to give maybe examples why you're trying to do something. So really, discussion and it's very important because you have a shared end goal. In the end, everybody wants to achieve something for the project. And as I said earlier, surround yourself with other technical leads, but especially with passionate people who care about what we're doing. Regarding offshore, it can be challenging. Obviously, there's a time difference. If you're working with a team that's in a completely different time zone, this has a benefit because work will get done at night when you're sleeping. That's really nice. But it's also very difficult because you will have less time communicating with your team members. Also, the team members in an offshore location, they will have it even increasingly difficult to talk to your customer. Now, a lot of developers really like working during the night. I don't really do that, to be honest. But if you work with an offshore team, maybe try to do night shift every once in a while, because you will get to work together, and it's also like a sign of respect, saying, okay, we can communicate better. Regarding communication, try using instant messengers. I mean, nowadays everybody's using Slack or HipChat and have integrated these things with your CI/CD pipeline and things like that. But it's a lot more easy if you want to ask a question, if you just do it on a Slack channel or on HipChat, and you will get feedback from more people. It is more difficult to just pick up the phone and really call somebody for a certain question than just quickly ask a question, and you can respond to it whenever it suits you, whenever it's fine. Maybe the next day when the offshore team goes to sleep, then you can look at their issues. Also, maybe just interested to like bounce ideas of each other. Maybe we need to do this. What do you think about that? And you get some feedback. That's also really interesting. This is not just for offshore. I also think that you should be looking at communication tools like instant messengers for local teams, but with offshore teams, it's even more valuable. And then prepared work. The technical design that I was talking about earlier, the user stories, in general, they will be the primary means of communication of your offshore team with what you're doing. So make sure that you do this good, that you spend some time on this, because that's what will be executed. Another thing that's very important when you prepare this work and when you do communication is that some words and some languages have different meanings. For example, the word yes. I mean, everybody knows probably these stories that some people just say yes to everything and have absolutely no clue what was going on. I've been in this situation where I explained that a service that I created. It was the first time that I needed to explain this to an offshore team, and everybody's saying yes. And then afterwards, they really did not understand what I was trying to tell them. But you can make this explicit. Just say, okay, yes, I understand that this needs to happen in order that we can achieve that. Just make it explicit. And then, last but definitely not least, everybody is part of the team. I have worked once with a project manager who really saw offshore developers as cheap labor. And that's really terrible. Some of the best people until this day that I've worked with were offshore developers. Just treat everybody the same. Embrace this diversity that offshore development brings to you. But then I really mean this. Treat everybody the exact same. So if you get mad at somebody because somebody screwed up, and people screw up all the time, I screw up all the time, just make sure that you, in a private channel on your instant messaging, tell them that they did not do a good job. Because if you just be polite to everybody all the time, it's important that they know what they're doing right and then also what they're not doing right. So that's the same for local people and for offshore people as well. Estimating is hard. Does anybody know Douglas Hofstadter? Douglas Hofstadter. He has a really interesting quote. It's called Hofstadter's Law. It always takes longer than you expect, even when you take into account Hofstadter's Law. Estimating is hard. That's for later. Estimating is hard, but it can be rewarding if you get it right. But you will not always get it right. And there are a couple of techniques to become better at estimating. One that often in Scrum or Kanban projects is happening is called planning poker, where you define some kind of sequence. Often Fibonacci is used, so just basically random numbers, and then you're going to estimate user stories using these numbers. And it's very important that you set a baseline. And contrary to what most agile evangelists are saying, I don't like to pick one as the baseline. I think if you want to have some kind of granularity, maybe you should take a 10-point user story as the baseline. For example, 10 is your typical CRUD operations on an existing table in the database. Because if you afterwards only need to do the create part or a change or something, then you can estimate lower. To me, that makes a lot of sense. Allow reasoning. So when you're playing planning poker with your team and you have a couple of people who are playing really low cards, oh, this is really easy, and somebody else on teams plays a very high card, then there's some kind of mismatch. Maybe he knows or she knows something that the other people in the room don't know. And then allow from some reasoning, from an explanation. I know this data model because I've seen it in the past and it's actually absolutely terrible. You will not be able to use ORMs because you need to write the query yourself because it's just a terrible data model. Or maybe you want to, maybe that leads to a new user story. Okay, maybe we need to look at the data model and optimize that. And uncertainty is normal. If the difference, the delta between the low cards and the high cards is really high, then you might need to work on this uncertainty. Maybe we need to do a technical spike. So for example, when we're integrating with some third-party service that we've never integrated with before, maybe we need to look at how do we consume these other people's data. That might not always be possible. And if it's not possible, if there's really a lot of uncertainty, then that might just be something that you need to cope with. You need to go to your customer and say, okay, there's so many unknowns in here. We can do our utmost best, but yeah, we don't know. It might take a day, it might take 3 weeks, and then they can decide on taking that risk or not. If you work as a technical lead, you will often always also be asked to do some solution estimating. So that's estimating for a project that's not happening right now. Maybe they want to do it in the future. Maybe just don't have a ballpark estimate of the costs. And I always use the above formula. It's called 3-point estimating, where you do an optimistic, a best guess, and a pessimistic estimation, and then you use just formula to come to a weighted mean. But when you do that, it's also important that you think about the known unknowns. So we don't know how to talk to that service, we don't know it, but also about the unknown unknowns. There is a service we need to talk to. I mean, it's possible that we don't even know that. And this is probably even not the monkey. The 20% is also very important that you be realistic. You're estimating for a team to implement something, to deliver something. You're not estimating for yourself for the utmost perfect conditions in which you can do something. You're looking at the ability to execute for your team. So add a percentage for testing, for debugging, for documentation, for the what the fuck moments and things like that. Also be very about what are your deliverables. Some customers might say, oh, but the deliverable for us is also a technical documentation. We need to have it. If you're doing APIs, you probably need some API guidelines or documentation regarding your APIs. So also factor that in. Any estimate is better than no estimate. Even if you're talking about estimation with somebody and it sparks up some kind of discussion. Oh no, this is way too much. This is totally impossible. We're never going to do this. Then it's already been a success because you're talking about it. You're getting more and better insights from it. But I also believe that you should be honest with yourself in that. When for example, management tries talking the number down, saying, "Oh, can't you do that faster? I mean, I know somebody who can do it faster." Just be very upfront and saying, "No, this is what I believe it will take." They will respect you when you say, "This is really what I believe it's going to take. I did my utmost best." So just don't give in to those kind of managerial reactions. In general, we tend to be better at estimating when we're estimating smaller packages because it's more easy to fit in the head. It's all the entire microservice sales pitch, but don't forget the bigger picture. It often is already enough if just like a high-level estimate saying, we believe that this will take a couple of months, not going to be years. And then if people want to have more, then you can do smaller estimations as well. And then obviously share these estimations with your colleagues, with your customer, and then maybe start a discussion on that saying, why do you believe that this part of the program will cost that much time? And if you want to become better at estimating, review your estimates. After the project has been implemented, looking at why did something go faster or slower, because you will learn from that. Number 11, interfacing with the outside world. I wanted to have a slide with some kittens on them. So, in general, if we just go outside and we start discussing about a certain technology, we'll probably be understanding ourselves. We're all technical people. We really care what we're doing. Your customers, most of the time, they will not be technical people. So look at making sure that your reasoning is also understandable from that. Look at draw comparisons to other things that they're doing. If you look back at the domain-driven design, try to establish a ubiquitous language that everybody knows what you're specifically talking about. I don't believe that the technical lead should be the single point of contact for your customer or for your team, because it will introduce a liability on yourself. You will be responsible for everything. You don't want to do that because you will never be able to leave the project again. I've experienced this. I used to work at government a couple of years ago, and I was working on a fairly easygoing project. We had a couple of really cool mathematical algorithms calculating a lot of stuff, but it was easygoing. The customer's really happy what we're doing. Budget was never an issue, so we were doing that. And at a certain moment, there's like the fairy tale project that just existed and was looking for somebody, and I really wanted to do that. They had the coolest technology, they had the best people. I really wanted to get into that project, so I applied for it, and I got it. I was super happy. Then when I went back to my older customer, I was actually within government, we have different departments, so it was one customer but with different departments. I was not allowed to leave. They said, we have nobody else who knows the algorithms like you do. And I never thought about documentation, because who likes writing documentation, right? If you're the single point of contact, then you're also the first point of failure. So try to be the first point of contact. Maybe they can come to you first, and then make sure that every other developer on the team can continue his work, that is not continuously interrupted. But then try to make sure that you involve some people in certain problems so that you have a shared understanding of your domain. No, the magic word. I was also aiming for the slide with the least letters on it. I'm pretty sure that I nailed it. In general, many people, and especially developers, have like a tendency to say yes to every problem. Yeah, sure, I can do that. Oh, we can make that budget. We can make that the deadline. When people come up to you and they have unrealistic expectations, then you should say no. Just to know, no, we're not going to be able to do that. Often this will require some explaining afterwards. But this is the magic word. And as a technical lead, I believe that you should use it when you think that it's valid. And then the last tip is facilitating, and I just put it between brackets, agile teamwork. And I want to stress the teamwork. If you want to do agile, and this is not a talk on agile, but look at making a backlog, involving people in prioritizing this backlog, doing sprint planning, and things like that. But first and foremost, don't only focus on the agile, on the Scrum or the Kanban part, because your team's strength is not. It's not a function of the talent of one individual member or multiple individual members. It's about people working together, about collaboration, tenacity, and mutual respect, because you're doing something as a team. So try facilitating an awesome team. Have a good time in what you're doing. I mean, I said it before, one of the cooler jobs out there. Just have a good time in what you're doing and what you're building. Thank you. I have about 2 minutes for questions, so.
Thank you for your awesome presentation. I had a set of questions for you.
Okay.
I'm sure you've heard about multifunctional teams. Where
yes.
Okay, so I will not explain it. So what do you think about such kind of teams, and what do you think of a technical lead role in such a team?
It touches on the. So the question was, if you have a multifunctional team where multiple team members can do different roles, right? Okay. How would the technical lead function? That. But what I was saying earlier, that the technical lead is not only a role; it's an activity. If you have strong people in your team, and some people can take on that role or that activity for amount of time, then you should. And you can always combine them and coach them. It's not some kind of title that you get. It's an activity. It's something that you do because you want to make sure that your non-functional requirements are met, or that people are working together correctly. Okay. More questions? There was a question over there, I believe. Yeah. I'll repeat the question. Just shout on something.
So just a small question. You mentioned playing poker.
Yes. Okay, so the question was who should be included in when you're playing poker, when you're doing estimations for certain sprints. A lot of that depends on the size of your project. If you have a two-pizza team project, then you can have maybe like 1 or 2 backend developers, a couple of front-end developers, product owner. Product owner should always be involved because he decides or she decides what will be implemented. And if you have multiple people doing who are responsible for the backend, then maybe you can switch the roles. Maybe you take one guy for 1 week and then the girl for the next week and things like that. If you have a smaller team, then maybe just include everybody. If you really do this during your sprint planning and you time box it, it should not be taking, it should be taking like half an hour max.
And from your point of view, product owner should vote or not?
I don't think that the product owner should vote. He should be there to explain what's need to be implemented. Everybody who is involved in the code base can vote. Okay. Yes, there's a question over there as well.
Okay, so point about availability.
About availability.
Yes. What techniques do you use to split your time? Because as for me, it's the most difficult thing.
So the question was regarding the availability about the time management. How do you assign time to certain parts of the technical leadership activities? And that is a very difficult one. What I do is before I start on the project, and sometimes even during, for example, when you start with a new epic, you look at how much time you want to be spending on project management or Scrum Master, the technical part, the technical design. I will write those up front, just for me, what I intend to work on for a specific epic or for a specific project. And I will really often reevaluate these. So for example, if I'm spending a lot of time talking to business, talking to the customer, I'm not spending enough time with the team. I might be missing things, or that they might be needing me for certain parts. Maybe I'm not even giving the correct information to the stakeholder. If you just are aware of these, then you can respond to them. And I personally, I do it quite formally. I actually write them down. And just for me, just very on like a white paper or something, just write down the amount of time that you're spending on things, and validate if this is still a good way to spend your time. So for example, at the project that I'm doing right now, I'm doing way too much Scrum Master thingies. I personally not really like doing those kind of things, so that's important as well. But I noticed that I was not around the team often anymore. If you have young developers in your team, they're usually super motivated to do a lot of new things, but they will rely on you because they will need some experience from you as well. So what I did in that specific situation is I went to the product owner and said, okay, I'm not there enough for the team. We need to have a separate Scrum Master role. And you need to explain the rationale behind this. Why do we need a Scrum Master? Well, I think you're doing a great job. And if you can just show them the numbers and see the questions that you're not answering, they will generally respond to that and maybe try to look for a solution for you. So I try to do it pretty formal. All right, more questions? There's one over there. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a really good question. So the question was, if you're in a team and nobody really wants to pick up the technical leadership role, how do you will assign it to somebody? And what I believe is, if nobody is taking up the role himself or herself, assigning it to somebody will also probably not be the greatest idea because they will not be invested in that. They will not be motivated to do that in the right way. And then I really think that you should be looking at role rotation. What we generally do, I've been in that situation. When we usually do, when we had 2-week sprints, and we would assign a new different SPOC for that sprint. So this sprint, all the questions about certain technology will come to you. And if you don't know the answer to that, no problem, but make sure that you connect the right people and do things like that. So that's really about the role rotation. In all honesty, it's easier if you have somebody available that does that all the time and that takes up the responsibility and the accountability. Okay? More questions?
As you mentioned, no one likes to be distracted, and though you also mentioned that you need to avoid to be a single contact person.
Mm-hmm.
How do you encourage a team to participate in communication and to face with distractions?
Okay, so the question was, developers generally don't like to be distracted. But how will you make sure that everybody is involved in certain decisions and everybody knows about the entire project? if you look at the specialities of certain people, they will be more eager to take up ownership in those kind of things. So, for example, if you have somebody who has really strong front-end skills, JavaScript skills, it knows Angular 5 because before it came out, then you should maybe look at that specific person and say, okay, we need to do some kind of documentation phase. Maybe we need to do a 1 hour training to the older developers. Then they will be documenting it, then they will invest some time in it, and then the knowledge will be shared around to different people. For example, the same thing if you have a dedicated database administrator. Nowadays, not many projects have that anymore, but if you have complex databases, then you should ask him the question, look, we need your input on this. People will feel valued but for that, because okay, they're asking me, and I know the database very well, so they need you can do documentation, you can do coaching, you can do things like that. But it's important that you know who is ready to do to what part. So if you ask your senior front-end guy who knows Angular by heart, maybe it's not the best place to start asking difficult database questions. So just try looking at your team, being part of the team, and identifying who is strong at what, and then try to split up the knowledge within the team so that you can establish a more broader knowledge within your team.
Like you mentioned such situation, you came as a new team lead to some existing project,
Mm-hmm.
and in this project there were some people that think that they are better team leads than you.
Mm-hmm.
They expecting to be team leads, but you are a new one.
Okay.
How you will deal with these leaders in the existing project?
Okay, that's a really difficult question. So the question was, when you arrive at a new team and the team has a technical lead in place, not a technical lead?
They expecting that they will be a technical lead. They are
Okay.
not, you are new technical lead.
Okay.
How to deal with the people who like sabotage or something?
Okay. I'm luckily have never experienced people trying to sabotage my work, but I can imagine something along those lines.
They're not motivated to work enough.
They're not
They
motivated.
think that they will be team leads. Not
Okay.
work.
But it's maybe the answer can be combined with what the first question was. If you install some kind of role rotation, then they can pick up some of the leadership talks. It will never work when you come in at your new team and saying, okay, you're the senior backend guy. It's very nice, but I'm the senior backend guy now. You're going to do exactly what I'm going to say, because you will come across as very dominant, and it will not work anyway. Especially nowadays, there's so much development work going around everywhere. If you try to boss people around, that will never work. People will just leave, or you will be forced to leave. So try to think about like role rotation, making sure that everybody works together on the same technical vision, and that you have this established. That's also why I said that if you want to communicate this technical vision, be sure that you include your team members, saying how do we get to the technical vision, and what have your experience in the project, what can we learn from you, especially if it's an existing team, because they will know the software by definition better than you do it. So just try to involve them. It's like really about communication skills, about leadership skills, but it's a very difficult situation.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Дякуємо, що прийшли сьогодні. Зараз на 3-му поверсі вас чекає автопаті. І чекаємо вас завтра о 8:30.